want to talk about the unique mechanism, and I want to talk about the evolution of the unique mechanism and kind of what I see going on right now and a mistake that I see some folks making. And I'd love to get your take on this because I don't talk to a lot of folks about this, but I see this all the time with entrepreneurs and marketers and copywriters. So just to make sure, right, everybody listening is on the same page. So from my perspective, the unique mechanism is how your product or service delivers the result. It's the unique process, system, aspect, piece of your product or service that is responsible for delivering the result, delivering the promise. And we know from Gene Schwartz, right, that we see as markets become more and more sophisticated, right, it starts off with let's make the promise, and then it becomes the promise expanded, and then we go into this let's present the promise with a mechanism. Well, I'm seeing this weird, I'm seeing more and more marketers online, more and more copywriters kind of getting the value of a unique mechanism, getting the value of differentiating their promo with a unique mechanism. But what I'm seeing is it getting to this point where the unique mechanism feels much more promotional than it does credible. Meaning like the example that I love to use with the unique mechanism is with fat burners, like the pills that you take, that people take.
Right.
And so, right, there was a time when the first fat burner that added Garcinia cambogia, that herb, whatever, that became the unique mechanism for that particular supplement. It was like this helps to burn fat because it's got Garcinia cambogia, which prevents the absorption of fat, blah, blah, blah. The mechanism, that addition of Garcinia was or became the unique mechanism, but it was like a credible, legit, believable mechanism, right? It was a real mechanism. It was the real reason. And today I see this trend where what marketers are doing is they think that is the equivalent of just slapping a name on their perspective. Like it becomes my unique mechanism is the Todd Brown formula. Right. And the Todd Brown formula, they think, right, it's the Todd Brown formula and it's crossed over this threshold from my perspective where these unique mechanisms now just come across as promotional. Now as the consumer hears that and they don't think like, I don't believe that the Todd Brown formula was discovered by scientists or like it's a new medical breakthrough. Or it's going to be written up in the Wall Street Journal, or I see it now as a promotional tool that this marketer or entrepreneur is using. And so does that make sense, man?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a question of that authenticity thing. Yeah. Where somebody goes, and sometimes it's not intentional that they come across sounding that way. I mean, somebody might be doing that because they're like, I'm trying to put one over on the person. But I think a lot of times what people do is they get in that side of their mind where they're doing the sales pitch, and they're doing it by a formula. And they're like, I got to do this part, and this part, and it's still missing something. It's like. This may be a far afield analogy, but it just popped into my head, so I'm just going to say it. But it's my wife is a musician, and she talked about when she was going to music school that you'd have some people that were just really good musicians, and then you'd have these other people who had come in and they were going to school because they were from a wealthy family that said that they had to go to music school, and they would play these pieces. They didn't give a crap about the music at all, but technically they were good. But there was something about the technical aspect. There was just no soul in it. There was just something missing. And I think when people do that unique mechanism thing, the people who like you, or when you're talking about it, you're like, what I notice is making this sales pitch work, that mechanism they have, I've never heard of it before, and it's so real. But then they hear it from somebody else hears that and they go, I got to have a unique mechanism. So they just jam it in there, and it's got nothing. It's got no meat to it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's true. It's an authenticity
No, that's so
question.
good, man. I think that that's so good. That's such a great way to to explain it, and I think, like you said so many times before, and I really, I really credit you and Mark for really drilling this into me. Like, look, you got to start with a good idea. You got to start with
Right.
something good. And I think that a lot of these marketers, and again, unintentionally, for most, I'm sure, but they skip that. They find the quickest possible way to, like you said, have this technically sound promo with a unique mechanism in there. So without doing the research, let me just take what it is that I'm talking about and put a new name on it, and then talk about that new name. And the problem, like, where, from my perspective, working with lots and lots of entrepreneurs, serious, motivated entrepreneurs, is I see now the market, a lot of competitive markets are being flooded more and more with these promotional mechanisms. So now it can feel like it can feel like there's a lot of unique mechanisms all over. Like everybody and their brother's got a unique mechanism now.
Right. So mine's got to be better than that guy's.
Yeah, and it's just a weird, like for me, my take, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Number one, like, and again, got to give credit where credit's due. I really, I learned this from you and Mark and folks far smarter than me. Like, you got to invest the time in researching, in examining, in digging out, in finding the quality idea, in finding the true, like, to use your word, to use the authentic, the legitimate authentic elements of your promo. Like, why is it exciting? Not how can I make it sound exciting, but why is it exciting, man? Find it, dig it out, and don't move forward until you find this thing that you're jacked about, right? Like, don't try to make it sound exciting. It's almost like, in a lot of ways, I see, I always say, when a lot of marketers end up with this hyperbolic, just bloated, like crazy copy filled with adjectives and adverbs and whatnot, like all that, it's because I really feel most of the time it's because they're trying to take an ordinary thing and make it sound good. And the only way to take this ordinary thing and make it sound good is if you layer on crazy language and words and phrases. But if you have a good thing, man, you don't need those crazy words. Just let the good thing shine through. And so I just think it's getting to the point where, it's, let's just choose a name. Let's call it X, roll out X. And so it's crazy, man.
I think you're right. And I think that the thing that you said there that really, I think, stands out is letting the thing shine through. Because obviously not everything is going to be great. Not everything is going to be original and unique. But there is a lot of things have an aspect of them that's unique and interesting. Yeah. That just like people seem like they're the same until you get to know them, and you're like, oh, that's really so Todd, that kind of thing. That you can find that by doing that digging. You can find that aspect, and also kind of associated with that. A lot of the people that we're talking to are selling information products, and there it's even better because there are no assembly lines or anything to fire up if the product needs an extra something, it needs to be shaped more, baked more. You can add uniqueness, and by improving the product sometimes. So
I think
that
you're
too.
Right. I try to say, I try to, both for my team and for our clients and whatnot, I always say, like, look, first of all, also, and I'd love to get your perspective on this as well. The unique mechanism and the product are obviously not one and the same, right? The product is what contains the unique mechanism. It what delivers the unique mechanism. It's why the product works, but it's not one and the same. And oftentimes a lot of they end up, a lot of marketers, a lot of entrepreneurs will end up, they'll identify maybe or just choose a unique mechanism. And then I think in the way that they name it, I think you have to be careful. And what I mean by that, and again, I'd love to hear your take on this. So I always tell them, like, look, it's far more important that you, especially if you're a coach, consultant, author, speaker, info, product creator, that you identify a legit mechanism, one that you can prove, one that you can explain passionately why it works and how it works, right? Like, that is critical. It's far more important that you have a legitimate one than it is that you choose a great name for it, right? Like that you choose a whiz-bang name. And I always say that the reality is that I'm a big believer in, when it comes to the unique mechanism, I would much rather have a name that sounds credible rather than one that's promotional. Save the promotional naming for the product. Save the promotional name, right? But when you're talking about the unique mechanism, if you try to make it sound like, if your unique mechanism is the awesome gardening formula, I feel like you shot yourself in the foot, man, because it becomes crystal clear to the consumer what you're doing, right? Rather than, like, if it's a scientific name based on the way that you mix the soil, right? And that's why this process works. I don't know. I just think that people they're putting on their marketer cap. They're looking at the unique mechanism. They're saying, let me give a benefit-driven name. And in the process, they're shooting themselves in the foot. I'd rather it be a name that you could see showing up in a scientific journal or in the newspaper, like where you feel like, I could see that being written up, rather than, we came up with a whiz-bang name in the office.
Well, I've been thinking lately about how to explain to somebody the difference between, this is more Gene Schwartz stuff, between awareness and sophistication. Where he talks about the levels of awareness, those different, which I know you do a very good run through of that when you do your presentations and things. So where the customer, ranging from their awareness of the seller and the product and the problem they're trying to solve, all the way out to a very light amount of awareness of all those things. And when you do that, just as an aside, I've seen you give this presentation on this, and I like the way you talk about why you target those unaware people, because that's where all the untapped markets are. But then sophistication is a different kind of thing, where you're talking about the familiarity of the person with, I don't know, it's like, I'm not even quite sure how to explain it myself. So I'd be interested to hear how you explain that too. It's kind of a tough concept where there's a difference between the two. Yeah. It's like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Like,
yeah, for sure. I think, first of all, I think, man, I don't think, without question, I wouldn't be the marketer I am today if it wasn't for Gene Schwartz. I think that everybody who's involved in the direct response game should read Breakthrough Advertising at least once a year. Like, it is.
That's the Gideon Bible of the business.
Without question.
Whatever it is.
Without question. And so the way that I look at it is like this. So the levels of awareness, to me, represents how aware the prospect, the audience, is of their problem or the problem that we solve, and the different solutions out there to solve that particular problem, including right? So it's their awareness of, like, do I have this problem? Right? Am I dealing with this problem? What are the different solutions out there? What are the solutions that I'm interested in? And what does this particular business or company provide? So it's their awareness of, problem and the different solutions. Levels of sophistication, to me, is about what they've been exposed to from vendors, businesses, in terms of advertising. So you can take somebody, who is, let's say, problem aware. They're aware that they've got a problem. They're aware that they've got low back pain, but they're unsure of whether they want massage, chiropractic, physical therapy. They're still kind of just unsure of what the right path is. But then, that's awareness. But then sophistication is well, if we look out at all of the different purveyors of back pain relief products and services, what have they said to our audience? What's already been claimed? What promises have already been made? What mechanisms have already been presented? How inflated have the claims already been made to that audience? So it's kind of like we're looking at the audience for awareness level to understand what are they thinking, what are they aware of, what is their psychology like, right? What are they, right? Because obviously, like, look, when you're looking at levels of awareness, right, if somebody is completely unaware, well, it makes no sense for us to start with a problem-oriented lead or hook, right? Because they're unaware. They don't even think they've got back pain, right? If somebody is only problem aware, where they know that they've got low back pain, but they're unsure of whether they want to go to a chiropractor or massage therapist, and we have an ad that leads with choose the best chiropractor in West Palm Beach, well, it's off the mark. So we need to understand what our prospects are thinking, aware of, right? But then we also want to know, which is kind of what we've been talking about, like, how do we differentiate? How do we get mind share with that prospect based on what they've already been exposed to? So knowing they've already been promised XYZ, they've already been promised XYZ with this Todd Brown formula, unique mechanism. So how do we go in there with something that is going to be compelling based on their sophistication, knowing what it is that they're aware of? That's how I could have totally banged up Gene Schwartz. What's probably
no, I think that's good. I think that's good. I think that to me the breakdown is like book smarts versus street smarts. Like the awareness, they're not actually juxtaposed, but the people on the awareness scale, it's almost like how much research they've done, or how much, how deep they are into the problem, as you say, into the problem. But the sophistication level is like, if I were to talk to that person, how are they gonna sound savvy about this? Are they gonna, like a person who, and I think right now, because of the level of extreme exposure people have to ads, they may not necessarily be well informed on a very specific problem, or they may be very well informed. That's the awareness part. But their disposition to those ads, the way that they are going to receive them, that's their sophistication level.
Yeah.
And I think sophistication levels are really high these days.
Yeah.
People tend to be like, you are trying to sell me.
Yeah.
And this is like when you start talking about sophistication, that's when you talk about when a prospect is jaded or open to your message. Yeah. And there, I think, is where it ties back to your unique mechanism, because there just isn't that much opportunity to be unique anymore. So you have to be so authentic with it. And if you slap a name on it that sounds like you're trying to be markety, you're just going to sound like yet another guy, and you're going to get dismissed right away.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
It's like wearing a shiny suit in a happy hour and trying to get phone numbers. Yeah. I mean, people are going to be like, "Oh, come on." Yeah. So. Yeah,
that's a great way to put it. I mean, I think that you're man, I think that you're spot on. I love that. It's an interesting, it's such an interesting, it's interesting how things are evolving, how the way that people in general are responding to ads, to copy, is changing. It's changing, like you said, because they've been exposed to so much marketing and advertising and so many sales pitches, because I think that, there are a lot of charlatans. And so there are a lot of people that, they're making a lot of promises, and then, less and less are fulfilling on those promises. And so, man, I think prospects are coming in and they're looking to spot they're looking to be like, there it is. Right. I'm out. And so I do think that it goes back to what you've been saying, the authenticity. And I think, I think, look, man, I'll say it again to kind of come full circle. I think that it's it's easier. This sounds terrible because it sounds plotted and planned, but it's easier to be authentic when you start with something that is exciting. When you start with an idea that you're excited about, when you start with a hook that you're excited about, it's easy to kind of let that shine through, like we said earlier. But when you start with like a copywriting formula, or you don't start right, like, of course you're gonna, like, you're either like, you're forced to lather on the nonsense to try to make it sound good. And so I just go back to, I think it's more critical today than ever before that you do the digging necessary to find just a super compelling, interesting idea, and then just let that freaking idea shine through authentically.
Well, you remind me of Gary Bencivenga when he said that. He said something like that. I think a mighty product is better than a mighty pen.
Yeah.
And I know we're both big fans of Mark Ford's stuff and his ideas and everything. And he and Bill Bonner, they're my two mentors. They spend so much time trying to figure out how to teach copywriting and how to communicate what they knew worked by giving it names, by describing things like the 4 Ps and 4 Us and all these other things, and the different lead types was something that Mark and I worked out together for our book. Yeah. And this idea of the unique mechanism that you're talking about, I don't remember them having that phrase, but I think I heard it first from you, actually. Maybe you or Joe Schriefer, or both, probably through Joe, from you. Anyway, I love the idea that those phrases and things exist, because when you're talking to somebody about copy, you need to have a language you can use to talk about it. But for years and years, I would do these private seminars, and I would teach people stuff. And I'd find myself trying to teach it different ways. So first I was trying to figure out what the terminology was. And then when I got my head around it, I try and find a different metaphor to teach it, a different method to get to it, because I started getting bored giving the same speech over and over again. And I just noticed that, like, people would soak it up, but then they'd go away and they'd come back, like they'd send me some copy. I loved what you said. I wrote some copy. What do you think? And I'd be like, man, you missed the whole point. So I felt after a while that that language is all still very valuable, indispensable, really. But you have to be able to direct somebody back to the basics. So things like that idea of the authenticity and whatever, because if you don't, they get caught up in the exercise, the formula of selling, and completely forget that they're actually just talking to a person about something that's probably good for them, that they don't know about, but that they might be interested in. I mean, that's really the essence of it. It's like such a simple mental transaction.
Yeah, you're so right, man. I think I say it all the time to our tribe, like, they sit down and they attempt to write copy. Like, it's a weird, right? Like, right. I'm now, like, let me put Todd aside and let me sit down as Todd the copywriter and write copy, whatever that means. Like, almost as if it's a different language, it's a different way of thinking. Right. And you end up with something that, that sounds like copy. And like, I tell my team all the time, like, look, if it sounds like copy, it's not good copy. Like, right. It's not supposed to sound like copy. That is like that's an internal dialogue, like languaging. It's not supposed to sound like good copy doesn't sound like copy. Good copy sounds like a conversation that happens to lead somewhere, lead the other person somewhere. And I think that's why, it's interesting, I don't know how long ago this was, but you in one of your essays, you mentioned a training, like a program on logic or argument the structure of
Right.
argument. The dude with the bridges and whatnot.
As a Stanford law guy.
Yeah, and so I got it. I went through it, and it was deep, man. Like it was deep, and he was an interesting cat to say the least. But
Yeah.
I love it resonated with me then. It resonates with me now because of the fact that I'm such a big believer in that. Like what we're doing for me, right, is much more akin to being a prosecutor presenting a case than it is me being a salesperson. I'm a terrible salesperson. I don't like selling. I don't like, I never, I'm the one who, when somebody's like, I need to think about it, I'm like, great, go ahead. Call me when when you're like, but so I view what we're doing as presenting an airtight, rock solid, emotional and logical argument. And so that's why I think like, I'm not trying to be slick. I'm not trying to be smooth. I'm not trying to use, hyperbole. I'm just trying to let this bad boy shine through in a way where like I put all the puzzle pieces out in front of the prospect and in the end, they're like, I see it. I get it. Thank you for sharing that with me. I don't know.
Sure.
I think it's a different way.
There's a great need for that. I mean, people, I think one of the things that people say all the time is that people don't like, they don't like to be sold, but that's true. But I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes of what that means. It doesn't mean that it's wrong to sell. I don't want to get into like moralizing about selling, but it doesn't mean that they don't, that it's not right to sell somebody something, or that if you're selling something, you're the sleazeball in the room. What it means is that people don't like to feel like your reason for approaching them is a manipulative, self-interested reason. Yeah. They want to feel like you've got something that's going to be interesting to them because it might help them live the idea of themselves that they want to live. And you can do that in a completely authentic way if you're selling some kind of great thing. But there's so much noise out there and so many people saying similar things, offering similar things, or offering confusing things, or just so much noise in general that's going to drown out any message no matter what it's about, that somebody has to be able to shape and mold that so it's accessible. I think that's what we do. I think that's the prosecuting idea. You're organizing the thoughts for somebody so that you can just give it to them ready-made to process.
And I really learned that paying attention to guys like you that have been writing copy, like looking at like why does this internet marketing promotion or sales letter make me feel icky and weird, like, and the other one just brings me in and doesn't make me feel like, makes me feel like I'm being informed, but for some reason I just want the freaking thing that they got at the end. And so that's that. I also realize one other quick thing is I think also there's this tendency to, and I think it goes back to what you said, a lot of entrepreneurs, marketers, it's the exercise of writing copy, the exercise of creating marketing that converts. They think like my stuff needs to be filled with claims, claims of benefit, claims of result, claims of outcome. And oftentimes they've just got a string of claims. And that's all they've got. They've got no proof. They've got no evidence. They've got no rationale to support why they said what they said, right? They've just got a string of claims. And I tell our folks, our students and clients all the time, I'm like, look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to string together claims. Any schmo off the street can claim anything about anything, any given time. And so like, if you want them to believe what you're saying, like bring something that's got evidence. And it baffles my mind when I've had, students that have been like, they would claim, something about their product or service. And they would say to me, I've got no proof for this. And so what do I do like to get folks to believe me? And I'll say like, well, have you used this yourself? No. Have you tried this with friends or whatnot? No. So nobody has tried this yet. This is basically a theory that you have, right? Yes. In so many words, they would say yes. And they'll say, and so how do I like present, how do I make sure that they believe it? You don't. You don't even know if you should believe it yet. Like, you don't make claims that you can't back up, man. That's the problem there's so much garbage out there because there's so many unsubstantiated claims that are just like, I was told I should make claims. Let me claim this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I've got no evidence, no proof, and hope that they buy in. And then they wonder why their stuff sucks. It's not converting, and we're viewed as sleaze bags.
So I've taken a lot of your time, but I'm going to ask you. I think I have. I don't know, because we started and kept it running. So maybe we haven't. Because I could go all day with this stuff. But how would you suggest to somebody? Say they've got is a well-intended marketer. They've got their product there. You would say, I'm sure, do a lot of research. Yeah. But when they're looking for that unique mechanism, what do they look for? What kinds of things, what kind of angles would you say you might find that unique mechanism? What's a good way to sort of peel that onion?
Yeah, well, so first two things, man, I would say before you start looking within your product or service for the unique mechanism, you need to do your research, or what we call the examination of your prospect and your competitors. So you got to start, obviously, this goes without question, but I just want to say it just to make sure. You got to start with your prospect, right? Because you have to know everything emanates from them. And then you have to examine your competitors, because the only way that we're going to know if we've got a unique mechanism rather than just a mechanism is if we first start with what it is that they are presenting. Then, I like to believe that I believe that there are three different types of mechanisms. So now we're looking at your product or service, and we're trying to identify what is your unique mechanism. Again, mechanism being like how your product or service delivers the result. So the first way, you actually have a true built-in unique mechanism, meaning you've got a unique algorithm behind your software that gets the results. You've got a unique bodywork approach that you use to help alleviate people's low back pain. You got a unique recipe in your birthday cakes that make them insanely moist. Like, there is a very clear unique mechanism, right? That's the easiest one. Then you've got what I would call the unspoken mechanism. And this goes to the Claude Hopkins Schlitz beer, story of, like, I view the unique mechanism as, look, it's got to be unique to the prospect. It doesn't necessarily have to be unique amongst competitors. So if there is a part or piece or component of your product or service that plays a role in how and why it works, and it happens to be part of what your competitors offer as well, but they're not talking about it, that is an opportunity for you to talk about it and have it be part of your unique mechanism. Now, it might be short-lived once they catch on and they see what it is that you're doing, but it's all about what is unique to the market, not necessarily what is unique amongst your competitors. So that's an opportunity for you to step back and for you to look at what you do, what you say, the order in which you do it, why you do it in that order, why you include X and Y and Z, and why is this in here, and why is it packaged this way, even if your competitors are doing many of the same things, but you finding what is it that you're doing that they're not talking about that you could potentially leverage. And then the third way is direct from Bill Bonner, and that is, I call it the transubstantiated mechanism, right? Bill's, from Roman Catholicism, the idea of turning something ordinary into something extraordinary, the wine into the blood. And I think that that's where, like, look, if there, you may have if you're in the information product business, coaching, consulting, that sort of thing, you might have call it a system that you use that maybe it's 4 different ordinary parts. It's 4 different ordinary steps. It's 4 different ordinary elements, but you bring them together in a different way, even if it's slightly different. that to me gives you the ability to take that ordinary combination and package it differently. And so I don't know if that helps, but that's the
Sure,
way,
sure, I
right?
think so.
Those are three ways
Yeah.
that you can find a unique mechanism. And I believe that a lot of people, John, a lot of authors, experts, consultants, coaches, they have this weird, they're like, I do the same thing everybody else does. I do consulting, right? And all it takes, you just got to dig a little bit. Why do you, what do you start with? You start with a line of questions. Why do you start with those questions? What are those questions? What's the purpose of those questions? What do you go to next? Why do you go to that thing next? Right? So a lot of times, if they just spend the time thinking and digging, they'll see that there is a method to their madness, that there is more of their personality, of their perspective, of their experience that's been sprinkled in to take what it is that they do and make it, even if
Right.
it's just slightly different from everybody else.
I think that's such an essential. You were saying in the very beginning, like you say, it goes without saying that you would need to compare with your competitors and things like that. But I think it's absolutely worth saying, because it is the kind of thing where people forget to start. It's like
Yeah.
that 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 first of all, that idea of a kind of a context of status. What is the status quo, and why would I offer what I'm doing or what I'm selling for somebody else into a market that I'm just offering the status quo?
Yeah.
Because there's no way to stand out when you're the same as everybody else. Um, so what do you do? What do you do? That's when that leads you to those questions: what and why and how are you doing this? That's different. What's new? What new do you bring to the game? And how can you say, how everybody does it this way, I do it that way? How could you fill in those blanks? I think that's
Yeah.
really essential. Um,
Yeah, man. I think, man, I can't agree with you more. I think, look, I think, we could finish with this. You always need to ponder. You need to really, and you need to take it seriously. Why should somebody buy from you? Like, right? Like, and
yeah,
if you're struggling to come up with that, like, you got to recognize that there are a lot of things that at one point in time were important to people that aren't anymore, right? Like, you can't live, at one point in time, it was like, we've been in business for 50 years and that was critical, like, and that was valued and that was huge, and it's not so much anymore. And so, like, but why should somebody do business with you? And if you're struggling to answer that, then don't be shocked, man, if prospects are struggling to understand
right.
why they should do business with you. And so
Exactly.
this is, you gotta, I think the single biggest thing, John, that I can leave, your folks with, and we definitely have to do this again, certainly more often, because
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure
fun. I
I
like
get
it.
more from you than,
Yeah.
I get more from this than I'm sure your folks do.
Nah.
But it is, man, you gotta spend the time researching and thinking and researching and thinking. And you can't be so quick to want to sit down and start typing words and start assembling things together, like, until you've done the legwork to give you it's like, it's
Right.
people, it's like walking into the kitchen and wanting to start cooking right away. You don't even have the ingredients laid out. You don't even know if they're great. You don't even know it's like a cluster, right? Start with
Right.
the best of the best, right? And it makes things infinitely easier. And so hopefully that helps some folks.
Yeah, I think that's great. That is a good point to stop on, I think. But Todd, thanks so much. This is a lot of fun.